Welcome to Love Unleashed. I'm your host, Erin Davis.
Financial issues are one of the leading causes of divorce today. So I'm going to sit down with Shang. She's the founder of Save My Sense, and we're going to talk about the link between mental health and financial wealth. But here's what I want to know. Can we keep relationships sexy and also be financially healthy?
Hi, Shang.
Hi, Erin.
How are you? It's been so long since I've last seen you.
Yeah.
How have you been? Tell me what's going on in your life.
Well, it's the start of summer, and so I've got my older son starting some piano lessons. My younger son just started walking for the very first time, so...
Okay, congratulations. I have a dog. He's been walking since he was born.
I know. I wish that children came out walking. That would make my life so much easier.
That's great. Well, congratulations. Okay,
Thank
cool.
you.
What's your husband up to? I've known him now for almost 10 years, but I haven't seen him in a while. So what's he up to? What have you guys been doing?
Just working, enjoying a boring, joyful life, really. So...
You boring? I don't think so. I don't think so. Tell me more about what you've been doing work-wise, because it's the opposite of boring.
Well, I had a pretty long career in corporate strategy,
Right.
and in 2022, I gave birth to my second child, the younger one.
Right.
And right after that, I had a health scare. I landed in the ICU with an asthma attack. I did not know that I had asthma as an adult, but that happened. I kind of saw the light, and I was like, I kind of don't want to go back to the corporate world. It's not my thing anymore. I want to be more present for my kids.
Okay.
And thankfully, my husband and I had been very frugal, very intentional with our money, and we built up an incredible amount of wealth such that we don't really have to work for the rest of our lives. So in June of 2023, I said goodbye to corporate life, started to do this financial coaching company of mine, Save My Sense, full-time.
Save My Sense as in C-E-N-T-S.
Cents and dollars.
Oh,
Yeah.
cents. I like the word fun. Okay.
Yeah. And I got a book deal last year, so I have a book coming out in early 2025.
Oh my God.
So I've just been
Amazing.
focusing on helping people. I like to call it change your money life 1 cent at a time. That's Save My Sense.
That's beautiful. And saving your sense could also save a marriage or save a relationship. So as you know, I've been a dating coach for like over 10 years now. And finance issues are the number one cause of divorce.
Yes.
They're the number one cause of so many problems in
Yes.
relationships, no matter the age, no matter the stage. So tell me, with you and Mr. Save My Sense,
Yes.
your hubby,
Yes.
how have you guys made it work? I mean, your life is all about finances. So even though you've figured it out, it can't be easy all the time.
No,
Tell me how you guys
no.
have made this work.
I mean, we were very lucky that both of us knew that money was going to be a very big issue for any relationship. So when I was dating and looking for husband material, one of the top criteria that I had was responsibility, and responsibility in all aspects of life, including money, because I'd already been budgeting and learning to, not overspend and get into consumer debt.
Okay.
On his side, he also lived a very frugal life. And so he was also, in turn, looking for somebody who was willing to be very intentional with their money. And when we started talking about getting engaged, we actually started asking each other about, like, hey, what kind of career are you going after? How much does that pay? Do you have any debts? How do you...
Oh, at the engagement point is
We
when you
asked
asked,
about
okay, people
debts.
ask me this all the time.
Yeah.
When do you go there? So that's
Yeah.
when you did it. Okay.
I think you actually need to know each other's financial picture before you decide to get married and possibly combine your resources. It's a financial decision as well. So we did ask
You weren't
about that.
judging him early on like that first date? Even at the first date, you weren't looking at the way he was spending, what place he took you to? Did he take the check?
It was a casual date, actually. He
Okay.
hosted our first date at his place. He cooked. Well, he defrosted things, as I later found out. He made food. He made food. It was delicious.
Okay.
And for me, I wasn't looking to be impressed by what kind of food we go
Okay.
out to, because I'm
Okay.
more concerned about character. So we talked about money, and he actually raised the idea. He said, both of us were aligned on eventually becoming parents. Obviously, we didn't know how long it would take. And he said one of the hardest parts of a working parent is that transition from okay, you had no responsibility to now you have children to be responsible for, and you're trying to make it work at work, and you're not going to get a lot of paternity or maternity leave in the United States because that's just not what corporates do here. How do you make it work financially? What if we just learned to live off of the lower of our two incomes, assuming there's two incomes, and we just did that from the get-go, so that once we become parents, we could have the flexibility of either person staying at home or not fearing total unemployment at any time.
Okay.
That was how the conversation started. And I bought into the idea. I was like, I like the idea of not fearing unemployment for the rest of my life. And that's how we became super frugal while living in New York City, because that's where we landed after getting married, lived in the heart of Manhattan, just lived essentially kind of like broke college students almost.
Okay.
And just saved and invested, and that's how we built our wealth.
I like that your goal was never fear unemployment.
Yes.
I feel like most people, they dream too much. They set the bar so high and they don't even consider the possibility of unemployment. And then something could happen like COVID, like the pandemic hits.
Yeah.
And it's something that's so mind-blowing to them. But it's almost like you're setting expectations of okay, what if the worst happens here? And that works very well financially. How about emotionally, or dating, or with your marriage? Do you set the bar very high with your relationship, with your marriage, or do you find you know what, I am going to pretend I'm not going to fear losing my partner or having divorce? How do you think, how is that translated to your relationship? Because I do try to tell my clients and even myself, we have to always be prepared to be an independent.
Yes.
So we can't completely depend on another person, right?
Yeah.
So how has that affected the way you look at Mr. Save My Sense and you and your marriage?
I mean, I also see marriage, committing to somebody for life, it's a leap of faith. And you do it without having full information. You can never get all the information you need about a person in just that short dating period. We dated for a year and a half before getting engaged. We got married right around 2 years after dating. So to me, that actually felt like a pretty fast timeline. But I wanted to get married. So when you think about the financial aspect, you kind of have to hope that both you and your partner are going to commit to the same goal and same values, even if you behave very differently. So I was actually more of the spender in the relationship. I was, compared to the average American, I'm very frugal. But compared to my husband, I was the spender, and I liked nicer things. I would go out for, more fancy dinner, so to speak, and I liked my pretty clothing and all of that.
Okay.
Who doesn't? And so at first in New York, once we got married and we cut the budget to get to the amount that we need to live off of the lower of our two incomes, I was like, holy moly, I have to cut back 75% of my wants, essentially, to meet the budget. We'll have our needs. We can cover rent. We can cover our groceries, our transportation, because we didn't have cars. You just used a subway. But all of my nice clothing, eating out, travel.
I want specifics. Tell
all
me,
of that
what
stuff.
Was this clothing? What was the stuff you were spending?
And it wasn't even fancy, but I
What was
always thought that by the time I had a big girl pants job in New York, that I would carry a fancy bag, like a Louis Vuitton. I don't know why, but that was just in my brain.
That was my first handbag. And it was the same. It was
I
a
just
hand-me-down.
assumed that
But
if
when
you-
I moved to New York, I just thought
Everybody had a
nobody knows
bag.
It's a hand-me-down. Nobody knows my aunt gave me this. They're just gonna think fake it till you make it, right?
Yeah, but I saw everybody walking around in New York, and I assumed you need to have a good handbag, a good pair of shoes, a nice trench coat. That was my assumption, and I kind of had to give that up. Then all of our friends from business school also got their fancy jobs, and they were spending a lot more than we were. So now I'm seeing social media, people eating out, traveling, and definitely I felt a lot of FOMO. I was like, did I do something wrong? We all went to the same school, but I'm not living like that. What's wrong with me? But that was the journey that I personally went through for about a year, where I realized you're just trying to do something really different. And when you do something different, you have to really be okay with it and know that your values are solid and trust in the process.
Okay.
But at first, it was a lot of chaos in the marriage.
No, I want to break it down to like the actual specifics. Like, what did these conversations look like? And the questions before you got engaged,
Yeah.
literally, what were they? This makes a lot of people very uncomfortable.
Yeah.
And so, like, tell me, like, what you asked and what were the answers? And did you feel on the spot? Did you feel defensive when your now husband is critiquing your spending? It almost feels like a sensitive, like it's an affront.
Yeah.
So what are these questions?
I also joke that Mr. Save My Sense was not born with emotions as part of his personality. He's very rational, and he takes the emotion out of everything, which is actually really good for finances because you don't see your money as an emotional thing. So to him, he's like, well, Shang, all you got to do is cut 75% of your wants spending. But to me, it felt like I had to cut out a huge part of my personality. And he didn't understand that. Yeah. So I struggled. I cried. We fought all the time. I was like, why can't our budget be bigger? Like, we don't need to have such a restricted budget. And then he would always bring it back and be like, but don't you want to create this sense of not fearing unemployment, which I understood. Like, stuff happened in his childhood that led to him having such a strong stance. Right. But yeah, there were fights. The most salient one I remember, we lived, our first apartment in New York was this tiny, like 420 square foot, rent stabilized, which was amazing.
I had one of those.
Rent stabilized. So you put up with a lot because you put up with a lot to get nice low rent. And it did not have laundry even in the building. So I joked to hubby, I said, you have made it in New York when there's laundry in the building. But in the meantime, we need to go to a laundromat. And the laundromat, we had one down the street, so it's just one block, but the only time it allows for self-service laundry is Sunday mornings. All other times, you have to pay them to do your laundry. Only coin operated on Sunday mornings. And we each switch, so we each take turns once a week. So every other week, one of us hauls everything over, and then you have to do wash, come back, then switch to dry, then come back, and then go and pick up your laundry at the end.
Fun.
Yeah, 3 times, right? 3 trips.
Fun.
It was, I think, wind chill, negative 20 degrees, and I just about had it. I like bundled up, scarf, like a down jacket, everything, and I sat there on the bed. I'm like, why can't we just send out laundry just for this one time? I don't want to be the one going out. And I just pouted and pouted. He's like, okay, Shang's in the mood, and he kind of ignored me.
Okay.
He's like, it's your week. It's your laundry week. So he kind of just ignored me, let me kind of pout and throw a tantrum in the bedroom until I eventually went and did the laundry. But I remember that was one of my
But that was like,
moments.
okay, so that's a good example of how the finances literally were affecting you personally.
Yeah.
So all of this, the laundry, the back and forth, that makes me just think like finances are one of the least sexy things to talk about, to deal with, but it's something couples have to deal with like on a daily basis. When you say it's every single day.
It's a lived experience.
I've had people tell me like, when do you talk about it? When it comes to romantic date nights. So like some clients will tell me that they're getting close to engagement, but they want to keep the romance alive. So they're like, look, Erin, when do I talk about like this tough stuff? And are we still going to be turned on at the end of the night? Because literally you don't want to be laying in bed together and being like, it's your laundry day, hubby. and then how do you translate to lighting the candle next to the bed and then having, a little romantic intimacy night? How do you find the time to still be hot and heavy for your hubby?
It might not be a sexy time to discuss money, but I do like to call it a sexy money date. But that's for a marriage. Okay. When you're dating, you're going to ease into the topic. Like, we're not going to start right away, like, how much money do you make? What's your net worth? Do you have debt?
People do that. I mean, I hate to tell you guys, you're saying it like, of course you don't do that. People do this all the time. They turn dates into interrogations.
I think that's the wrong way.
Or they try to find, questions about, do you rent or own? Questions that kind of get them there. But they do this within 10 minutes of dating. I think it's a big no-no.
No. First date should be about chemistry.
Right.
Having fun, just getting to know someone's personality. As you start dating, you can start learning about what is important to this person that can include finances, but it's more than just finances. Like, I like to know if the person I'm dating, do they want marriage? Because that's kind of an important yes or no decision. Then do they want kids? That's a yes or no decision. And then what is it that they want out of life? Like, why do they do the work that they do? How did you come to pick this career? How important is the money or lack of money in this career to you, then you can start hearing a little bit about their thoughts around money once you start talking about work. My husband and I got explicit about actual numbers right around engagement. So then it was finding out, how much do you make? How much do I make?
Wow.
Where do you see yourself going in this career? Like, is it a stepping stone to something else? So we could kind of see the trajectory. And then
debts. You figure out debts. Okay,
we talked about debts before getting married. He had student loans. I did not. So I knew how much it was, what the minimum payments were. So we said, okay, we're going to have a plan where the student loan payments are going to be part of the budget. Eventually, there was some other thing that I did. Actually, we were able to pay them off in one fell swoop. But originally it was like, okay, we need a plan for student loan payments. And then also seeing others' expenses. So we did not live together, but when we go out, we would trade who pays for which date. But obviously, not all dates are equal. So we had a spreadsheet going already where it shows, okay, Shang paid for this date was this much, then hubby paid for that date was this much, and then if there's an imbalance after like a couple of months, then one of us would, send the other some money.
When did you start this? This is before marriage, or when was the spreadsheet?
Basically, it was
I'm fascinated
the spreadsheet started after 3 dates. So after once we became officially exclusive, and there was no need for him to feel obligated to be the one treating out dates.
Right.
We just went Dutch, or
I'm a
we
big
used
believer,
spreadsheet.
and then maybe I'm old school. I'm from a small town in Georgia. I believe the man should pay for the first few dates to show their intent and be the gentleman. I'm very old fashioned that way.
Yeah.
But then you come up with this spread. I like this spread.
This was after we were exclusive, so
Right,
he did
but
cover the first
exclusivity.
Yeah.
Whose idea was the spreadsheet?
I think we both just
What?
agreed to it. Well, we went to business school and we're both money nerds. We both love spreadsheets. So it was in our personality.
Wow.
We already had spreadsheets for other aspects of our lives. Like I use spreadsheets to plan parties and travel. He did the same thing. He also used spreadsheets to calculate how many days was in different cities. Just he likes data. I like data. All of that.
Wow. As a
stuff.
dating coach, I've kept spreadsheets to like rate the guys I've been with and like rate the dates and like the sex on a scale of 1 through 10 and things like that, penis size 1 through 10. I've never thought of like having a spreadsheet, but you're a money nerd, so this was very logical for you. People can learn from this though.
Yeah.
This is something people could like actually incorporate.
Yeah.
I just can't believe you started a spreadsheet. So this is good, and you guys are coming together with this spreadsheet after 3 days. And do you still keep it?
No, because our finances are combined now, so it doesn't matter who
Okay,
pays for
so
what.
you did this trade-off. You pay for this day, I pay, and you literally did an even. Was it even? You said that you would pay him if you saw that he had paid for more.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
This could really catch on though. So this is kind of controversial with the 50-50. So what I try to do as a dating coach, I'm trying to prevent marriage problems, dating problems, relationship problems. And since finances are the number one cause of divorce, I'm trying to, just like what you're doing, preempt, right?
Yes.
So I see finances this way. And when I'm studying marriage now, I'm still single, but I would love to get married.
Yeah.
But I'm wondering, how can I make it work being a freelance contractor professional?
Yeah.
How do you believe people should merge their accounts, have one credit card together, have a separate one for their own expenses? I'm a big believer now that meeting somebody later in life, I'm 39, I think things should be separate. And this is very controversial. I've had a lot of my clients say that's not what marriage is. It's merging. It's coming together.
We're the same age, by the way. So I totally get that that point of view, and you see it more and more as people become more independent later on in life. In dating, I don't see any need for any merging of finances. So during the entire dating phase, I'd say both of you agree on what you want to do for dates and whatever. And if one person wants to splurge more, but the other one is not comfortable doing so, then the splurger covers the splurge. That's kind of my attitude towards money in dating. In marriage, for me personally, I would say if you're combining your life, you're combining your time together, and if there's children involved in the future, you're already sharing so much, why not combine your finances? That being said, there's also data that supports this. Several studies, all published in the Wall Street Journal, they do this probably every few months, somebody writes about marriage and money, is once you are married, couples who share their finances get debt-free faster, they reach financial goals faster, and actually derive more satisfaction from their marriage by having combined finances. And they actually did a study where they did random assignment. So they had people that they assigned to try out joint finances.
Okay.
Then they assigned people to separate, and then one more group, they gave them a choice. And then they studied these 3 groups after about 6 months of doing this, and the higher satisfaction came out from the groups who ended up doing joint finances. That being said, if you are getting married later in life, there might be additional things that make this more complex.
Yes.
So
yes.
I would say, if you have children out of wedlock or children from another
Yes.
relationship, the money for that child always separate, because
Okay.
that doesn't belong to the new spouse. If you have a business, and especially a business with partners that are not in this
Right.
marriage, that also needs to be managed separately.
Okay.
And then, I have come across families where this is an issue. Family money, family inheritance, I think that also needs to be treated separately.
Okay.
But outside of those 3 issues, then the rest, I strongly encourage combined mindset. And this doesn't mean that everything has to be combined. It doesn't mean you need to have one credit card. It doesn't mean that you need to have one bank. And in fact, my husband and I have our own credit cards, our own bank accounts, our own retirement funds. Most retirement accounts, they're not joint anyway, because by law you have to create them separately. But we see the money as ours. So if he made money, it's just as easily said that I made that money. Like it's not like, oh, my hubby made the money, he chooses how to spend it. It's that money is for our family. How do we as a family choose to spend it? And I think where this really comes to the forefront is if one person becomes unemployed or no longer makes
Right.
income. That's the biggest part, because then it's like, what do? You don't want this power dynamic where the person who's not earning income feels less than in
Exactly.
the relationship.
Exactly.
And that's where I see the strength of a combined mindset come into play, is that, okay, just because I no longer work my fancy corporate job, I'm still the CFO of our household. I'm still the one managing the money, choosing where to put our kids for activities and schools, deciding how much the grocery budget should be. I still have all that power, even though I'm not the one making the money in our family. Yeah.
That's interesting. So what about, you're saying how the making money combined mindset, but what about the spending money when it doesn't come to the children? Because I now know your past with the handbags. You wanted that Louis Vuitton bag.
Yeah.
But do you ever fight with your hubby about the actual personal expenses if you're combining, or do you keep
We had a
that
solution for
separate?
this. We had a
Okay,
solution because we did fight. Because every time in those beginning months, I fought against the budget, say it's not enough money for me to spend. So eventually he said, okay, each of us gets, and it wasn't that much money, but each of us got, for each calendar year, $1,000, no questions asked. So $1,000, that's about, if my math is right, like, it's not a lot, like per month, but you have $1,000 to spend, and neither of us can critique the other on that. So that's how we started it.
Interesting. Okay, I love
1,000.
that.
I
love that.
I blew through mine
Okay.
within 1 month because I was asked to be a bridesmaid. So between the dress, the
goodness.
bachelorette party, the
Trips,
travel,
of
he was never asked to be a groomsman. So I blew through mine, and he felt really bad. He gave some of his budget to me.
Oh, that's
He's
okay,
like, look, Shang, I just don't spend money the way you do. I know you're struggling, so I'm gonna give more of my no questions asked budget to you.
Okay.
So that was how we got through the first year, because I blew through mine so quickly. Then the second year, I got more into a rhythm with our budget and just got better at it. Probably spend 80% of that $1,000 budget. I didn't spend through it, and it wasn't that quick. Like, I was getting a lot better at anticipating what things had to come up. And then if there were emergencies, which there were, I needed
Right.
therapy, actually, when we first got married. And I
when you first got married.
I needed therapy to address some issues from my childhood that were coming up in our first year of marriage. Like,
Did he pick this out? Did he see this? Did
he saw, he's like, I think you need
did.
therapy. Therapy was not in my vocabulary growing up. Like, I grew up in a Chinese American household. Therapy is seen as a source of shame.
And this American male that you married,
Yeah.
he suggested this
He
to
said,
you.
I was like, no, I don't need therapy. There's nothing wrong with me. But he's like, just go. And
Not together. This was just for you.
just for me. He
Yeah,
said,
no,
there's
tell me
something
more
in your
about-
childhood that affected our marriage. So finally, like I was shaking, my hands were shaking. I picked up the phone, called my health insurance, found after a couple of tries, like I tried out a couple of other people. Some of them I paid out of pocket, some I did not. Eventually found one that I clicked with who is still my awesome therapist today. And when you add up the co-pays and the deductible altogether, I spent another $1,000 that I didn't anticipate on all this therapy. But he said, look, it's healthcare and you needed it. So that's just an extra $1,000 tacked onto our budget for healthcare. So that was how he made an exception to originally a very rigid
A lot of
plan.
people do that with healthcare, I
Yeah,
would say. That
yeah.
you have to look at those expenses
Exactly,
differently than
exactly.
the Louis Vuittons, right? Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then I learned how to shop used, consignment, like lots of that happening in New York. So I started getting nice clothing, but at massive discounts. Like I had a Diamond First wrap dress. I was like, I got this for like $50. They go for like $500, $600.
You sound like me. That's what I do.
Yeah.
Too. I try to look like $1 million.
Yeah,
But,
and I was like, you know what? I actually look really nice and all this stuff, and I
That's
don't have to pay
amazing.
full price. And then so some of my desires went away. And then what I teach now is not staking your happiness or your identity in what you purchase or what you experience. So I was like, I learned to be happy and joyful and seeing myself as enough, regardless of what I wore, what career I had, what vacations I could afford. And that led to my transformation over the years of cutting back on spending. And then at the same time, my husband also changed over the years and saw that, you know, sometimes nice things are just nice. And it's okay to spend on it when you have the budget.
So practical. Like
Yeah.
what I'm really picking up on is you're definitely the emotional one.
Oh, yeah.
Even with your laundry story, I'm imagining you crying and trekking in the snow and the ice.
Oh, my
and wind.
gosh.
And I'm picturing your husband just sitting there calmly and not understanding the emotional thing behind all of this. So, and this tells me too that he suggested therapy, but did he go himself, or is he... Because he seems so practical to me, yet he suggested it to you. So I'm trying to find the connection between mental health and the finances here.
Oh, yeah, it's
Did
huge.
you find that your own financial journey did it run parallel?
Yes, because it took about a year for my therapist to work out the issues from my childhood, which led to a lot of imposter syndrome.
Oh,
And with
okay.
imposter syndrome comes a lot of spending because you just don't believe that you are enough. And you believe that you have to spend or look a certain way in order to be successful. Once we worked through that, my spending also went down because my therapist taught me how to love myself as I was. And sometimes my husband came to a couple sessions with us to work out some communication issues. It turns out it was pretty minor. That was not the issue at stake. It was me growing up with imposter syndrome. And yeah, I realized I became a lot more confident and assured in this plan that we had financially. You know, this is now after a year and a half of therapy. I was like, oh, I guess I can share a little bit about what it is that I'm doing, because people are like, where's Shang? Why is she hiding under a rock? Why is she always doing all this frugal stuff? And I started sharing about it, and that's how, like, over time my Save My Sense company formed. But I made that connection. I was like, Shang, you are smart. You got 2 fantastic degrees.
Good.
You work in management consulting. You run financial models. And yet, why did you struggle so much in that very first year of paring back your spending? And I realized it was tied to my mental health. And when I fixed my mental health, my financial health just went like it just took off like a hockey
And
stick.
that's not a coincidence.
It
I mean,
is not.
a lot of people don't know this. 15 years ago, I started as a matchmaker. I didn't start out as a dating coach, life coach, wing woman. And what I soon picked up was that my clients, the people hiring me, they weren't ready to meet their partner. They were like, oh, if you just find me my husband, that's all I want. And then I soon assessed that there was a lot underneath the surface, right? So I kind of became a psychologist through these past 10, 15 years of doing what I'm doing. And matchmaking transformed into coaching because you can't achieve your goals until you work on yourself, as cliche
agree.
as it sounds. So tell me where you think, does that apply to you as far as what, have you become a psychologist with
Oh,
Save
gosh.
My Sense? Like, I feel like somebody comes to you, walk me through when a client hires you, right? they're coming to you for financial help. How quickly do you assess that you have to go deeper with them? Like what happens? So walk me through an appointment.
Right away, because
that's what I figured.
what I found out from my research, and I really got into this because I was like, okay, I learned how to do it, but how do I teach it to others? Because it feels amazing to be financially free. And I started digging into psychology, writings, scientific research. I mean, there are a lot of studies out there that do a very isolated, people do this in a lab environment with this amount of money, and then it turns out into this. But I just started pulling all the pieces together, and the story I realized was our human brains operate on 3 levels. There's the very basic instinct, our fight or flight mode, the reptile brain, then there's our emotions layer, the limbic system, and then there's the cortex system, which is the more advanced strategic planning layer of our brain. And that's what makes a human brain. When you go through periods of poor mental health, and it could be something as slight as some anxiety leading to full-blown mood personality disorders, your brain is sick. Essentially, you have a brain flu. And when your brain is sick, like any other organ, it cannot perform at its best level. And then so when we are mentally ill, we tend to pull back to the more basic layers. So we either act out of emotion from the limbic system, or we act out of sheer survival mode, this reptile brain. And therefore, people who have poor mental health can't plan ahead. They can't budget. They can't have the capability of saying, I'm going to save a little bit of money now for my future, because they just don't see it. They're in survival mode. What I get today is what I'm going to spend. And also if they have trauma from childhood, from abuse, anything, it can lead to them not being capable of seeing themselves as worthy of a good future. And then so this is where you see debt-fueled spending, credit card debt, seesaw activity, inability to plan ahead, head in the sand, ostrich approach to finances. And then so I actually asked people, the first thing that I asked them to fill out a questionnaire. I asked about what was money like for you growing up? Like, what do you remember? What do you remember your parents or your guardians doing with money? Do you think you had a good childhood or not? Do you think you had a wealthy childhood or not? And then I also ask about any ongoing mental health, whether diagnosed or not, because some of them will start saying, maybe I need to go get checked out for ADHD. I'm like, yeah, that's a disorder.
You do this in the first appointment. You go right there.
I go right there. And I also ask, are there any other chronic health issues we should be aware of? Because it can be a lot.
Can I steal these questions
yes,
and use them on dates?
Take it.
Because I feel like my clients would be like, I want to know the answers to all of this stuff.
And then they fill out also the numbers. Like I asked for, sample average paycheck, average monthly expenses, net worth. So that's assets and liabilities. But what I realized was that question where I asked, what was money like for you growing up, basically told me 90% of why people behave the way they do today. For example, one of my recent clients who is well off, like they earn a lot of money, but they can't help but keep spending on everything, shopping all the time. In their childhood questionnaire, they told me they grew up basically with a working class single mom, and that mom taught them you can only buy things when they're on sale because they didn't have any budget. So she grew up learning you can only buy things when they're on sale, you can only buy things when they're on sale. But she didn't learn the reason behind it. And so when she grew up, she took that to mean buy things when they are on sale. So she twisted the meaning a little bit. So now she's getting email marketing, social media marketing, sale on this, promotion on this. And half the time it's not really a sale. But she just feels compelled to buy something every time she sees a sale notification. And when I put those 2 and 2 together, I was like, what if you just unsubscribe from all of those emails? And it was like a huge change in her financial situation by literally realizing, oh my gosh, she's just being prompted to do something that she felt was automatic from childhood.
Did you pick this up from your own childhood discovery? Like, what was yours like? Does anybody ever turn it on you? Because I know you ended up going to a therapist about your childhood and how it affected your financial journey. What did you figure out about yourself?
For me, it was the imposter syndrome because growing up, my parents, they're fine now, but growing up, my parents were very strict on me and said it's Harvard or bust. Literally, you are not worth anything unless you got straight A pluses and went to Harvard. Now, thankfully, I did go to Harvard, but I didn't get straight A pluses. And I remember being devastated one time when I got a 98 on a test. I said it was not a 100. I'm a failure. And my friends looked at me like, what the heck is she talking about? She got a 98. And why is she so stressed out? But I realized because my parents had trained my brain into thinking you're not worthy unless you did something that was amazing. And so as a young adult, that translated to why I really like luxury products. And I was like, I believe that luxury products represented the best of everything. So you are not worthy. You cannot appear to be successful unless
it's the top of the line.
Unless you get
Oh,
top
I
of the
see.
line.
No, and now I see how
Yeah.
it's all tied together.
Yeah.
That's so important. People ask me that all the time when it comes to dating, like how the same thing happens. And I always ask about childhood, like how did your parents treat you? And then how did this translate to your love journey?
Yeah.
Like my dad, this is so funny. I think we have the same dad, even though my dad's like this all-American. He actually speaks sign language and he was a football coach, really, really great guy, but he demanded same thing, A+, a 98 wasn't good enough. And it translated to my athletics also. So we have this story in my family called the no juice box for you story. So he made me play every sport and I had to be the best. So one day I went out to a softball game and I told my dad, I don't feel good. And he said, I don't care, excuses. I struck out all 4 times. I was 0 for 4. And I told him I'm really sick. And he was like, And then at the end of the game, they come bring out juice boxes for all the kids. I was 9 years old. And he goes, no juice box for you. And I was just so shamed. And then I went home and I had 103 fever and I was projectile vomiting. And my mom was like, why did you push her so hard when she was sick? And to this day, my dad feels awful. But I tried to tell him, Dad, the no juice box story. And by the way, for my 38th birthday, he bought me 38 juice boxes. So we are all past the drama now. But I tried to tell him it translated to my dating life because I was looking for the praise that I was never going to get. I wanted the type of man that I got into abusive, narcissistic type relationships because I wanted to please someone that was ultimately impossible to please, right? And then it translates to the finances too because I want to project being somebody that I want to please everybody else, and I didn't even find my own sense of style until later in life because it was about pleasing others.
Yeah.
And my poor dad feels so bad about the juice box story, and I talk about it all the time. But it's so important that we study those relationships early on because it translates to the finances. But it translates to dating, to everything, even to our relationship with our bosses.
Yeah.
And I felt that the first jobs I got, it was the same thing. I wanted to please this superior. And even if I never got there, it was this type of relationship, the juice box scenario. I was always looking to be given a juice box, and I was never really given enough juice boxes in my journeys.
Yeah.
So it caused me to get into the same types of relationships where you're never actually going to find it. So what age do you think it is that you've really kind of come into your own? People ask me this all the time. When's a good age to get married? When's a good age to buy a home?
Yeah.
Is there a good age, or is it when you're ready? Or what would you say?
I think it's when you decide that you want to live a life that's true to yourself. That's really the age. For me, luckily, like because I was so driven, I also put these very artificial timelines in my life. I was like, gotta get married by 25, gotta have a child by 30. I got married at 28 and I had my first kid at 33. Only about 3 years off. Not too terrible. But because of that, I actually was really, really strong on when you're dating, you gotta find someone that you wanna be with for life. Even though my imposter syndrome was not solved, I was actually very intentional in dating, and that's, I think, part of the reason why I was very lucky that I found my husband at that age. But I would say
That's young these days.
Financially set, I mean, I've coached people all the way into their 60s who, still haven't resolved those issues from their childhood when it comes to spending money. But once I teach people that connection, because people don't make these connections, but when they see that connection, they're like, oh my gosh, you're right. Like, I didn't realize I've been talking about myself this way. And then they make the decision of saying, yes, Shang, I've had enough. I'm going to live life a little bit differently. That's when I'm like, you got it. Like, that's when I know change is going to happen because they want to change.
Okay, good. See, I assess my clients as walking the walk and talking the talk. A lot of them come to me and they say, I'm ready to meet someone. And I do kind of an assessment too, and I kind of look into their financial situation, I'll be honest. Because are they just talking the talk? Or are they actually walking the walk, making the steps to meet a partner? Do you think that people can actually find love if they're financially not where they want to be?
Yeah, absolutely. I don't think you need to be debt-free to find love. I don't think you need to have it all together. But I think that you do need to recognize that should you decide to spend your life with a person, finances are going to be a part of it. And you have to be ready to have these uncomfortable, non-sexy conversations, and that part of your marriage, or a huge part of your marriage, is not, sexy time, but it is, hey, let's, balance the budget,
Yeah, but we gotta make sexy time happen. So I'm a big believer that finances are a constant part of a relationship, but I think sexy time is a constant part.
Yes.
I think couples need to prioritize finances, but also sexy time.
Absolutely.
Tell me what sexy time looks like now as a married mom of two boys.
I think that in general, we're talking about what is it that makes a relationship work. I do think that needs to be chemistry, there needs to be physical intimacy, there needs to be financial wellness, there needs to be mental and physical wellness as well as part of it. So yeah, my husband and I do make it a priority, and we believe that if you prioritize something, you need to find time for it, you need to commit to it, and you need to listen to each other and make sure that each other is, being taken care of in this relationship. And I would say that after 10 plus years of marriage now, it's still a priority, and I'm very happy with what we do.
How do you make time? Like, do you literally, I'm seeing the two of you in your spreadsheets, right? So I'm picturing like a highly organized home. Do you make date nights? Do you say like every night, for 10 minutes, we're going to emotionally connect and not talk about finances? Like, how much is an organized calendared time for the two of you? What does it look like? Like, how do you throw out all that financial, the kids stuff, and like focus on your marriage? Like, how does it work day to day?
We were very lucky in that both of us read a bunch of relationship and marriage books as part of our engagement journey. Because
both of you
we didn't have marriage counseling. I come from a church, and normally you would do that with a pastor, but we weren't getting married by a pastor or anything. We just had his dad officiate the wedding. So no pastors. They're like, we're not officiating weddings, so we're not going to do premarital counseling. So my husband and I Googled what are the best relationship books for marriage. We read like 4 or 5 of those. Some of them had workbooks. We worked through that. And a very important piece of advice that we got from several of these books was, marriage is something you recommit to every day of your life.
Every day.
You put in work every day. So we had a couple of quote unquote rules for our marriage. One is you don't go to sleep fighting with each other. Like, we can argue into the deep of the night. We try not to anymore, but we have argued. We try to hug it out at the end of an argument and say, I still love you.
Even if you haven't resolved it? And
even
then, you just hug.
And apologize for any mean things that we said during the fight. Because, we want to reaffirm that we still love each other. Yeah. We didn't mean to hurt each other, but we're kind of just in a disagreement on it right now. And we'll figure it out.
And hug it out.
Yeah, hug it out.
Really, okay.
Or, do more than hug it out.
I'm controversial. I actually tell people to go to bed angry. When they say don't go to bed angry, because as a coach, I have seen people at the peak of their anger say things that they can't take back. Yeah. So I always say sleep on it, and in the sun, the glow of the morning, it's going to have a softer light, and you're going to wake up a little bit softer about whatever happened the night before. So it's controversial because people tell me, but then I toss and turn and I don't sleep. And
it's the same thing.
It's a similar thing. I kind of like yours is like a middle of the road approach. So even if you don't resolve it, at least connect. Somehow before you go to bed. And I actually think that's probably the key, because I've tried to tell people, just don't say something when you're really, really angry that you regret. I promise you, it's much worse than trying to say, well, we can't go to bed angry. So then they just scream and hash it out. And I think that sleeping on it is a helpful thing. But I like this approach of the hug it.
Well, sometimes we hug it out in the morning. It doesn't have to be the end of the night, but over time, we've learned to just catch ourselves, we catch ourselves knowing we're going to just go into, insulting each other. And we just stop. And sometimes one of us will say, I'm just going to go to bed. And we might not hug it out, but it's usually done by the morning.
You don't let it take off into that zone. I call it the no return.
Yeah, the spiraling, yelling at each other. Weekly dates. We do date lunches, because with children it's hard to do date nights.
I was going to ask.
But we do date lunch. Friday lunch is our date lunch time.
So every Friday.
Yeah.
Okay. And then what does it look like?
We pick a local joint that we like. It's often probably like Italian or sushi or chirashi bowl or something Mexican, and just go out, have lunch, and then if there's some joint errands to be run, we do errands afterwards. It's kind of nice to actually do errands together as a married couple.
I kind of like it. I think it's fun no matter what. I'm like, can I believe right now I'm at Home Goods? I mean, living in LA, I just moved here from New York, and like when I'm pushing a cart around with my boyfriend, and I'm like, God, I'm here at Home Goods. Like, this is so cool. And like, I went to Costco for the first time last month. There's something really mundane, but also really beautiful about doing those types of simple things.
Because I'm also attracted to responsibility, and when you're running errands or taking care of the house. And my husband cleans. He does dishes, he vacuums, he organizes things. So to me, that's very sexy. And then we do about a date overnight once a month or once every 6 to 8 weeks.
Get babysitters or something?
So thankfully, we live near my in-laws. So they sleep over at our home, and then we take the car. And actually, we have one coming up in a week. We usually go to downtown LA, get a hotel for the night, go all out. Nice dinner, dress up, everything.
That's huge. I think people should
love
do that
it.
No matter what. So you really make a priority. I want people to take
And now that we're rich, we also do a once a year no kids international trip.
No
kids international trip. I mean, it is expensive because then we're also hiring a babysitter because it's a lot for my in-laws to handle. So we just came back May from Japan, 10 days in Japan.
Amazing.
I mean, the trip, at retail, we didn't pay this much, and I talk about it on my blog. The retail value of the trip was $25,000 because we flew business class, we stayed in 4 or 5-star hotels, and I'd also paid $1,000 for a babysitter in the meantime. But it was fantastic because we just really got to connect, didn't have the kids. Thankfully, kids were okay while we were gone. I'm always nervous that something bad's going to happen when we're gone. Thankfully, no. And then next year, we planned this way in advance. Next year, we already planned our next year trip is going to be Bordeaux and Paris in France.
Amazing. So. I think there's something too about having the future plans that keeps the marriage really strong.
Yeah.
Have you found that either with yourself or with your clients that like when finances are a problem at the time, or even if it's just temporary, that the sex life goes out the window? Like, do you find that there's a parallel? Like,
well, I don't ask my clients about intimacy. It's not my, and I'm not their marriage.
Deep.
God,
you don't
no.
Go that deep.
But I can tell on the way they interact with me in the weeks leading up to our call. The call is actually at the end. In the beginning, I'm doing a lot of the question and answer.
Okay.
I can tell if it's a joint answer from the couple because they're CCing each other, or if it's a single answer from just one of the spouses. And sometimes when I know there's a lot of dysfunction, when already they're like, one of the spouses approaches me and says, I'm married, but I only want you to do coaching for just me. And I do allow for it because I'm not here to impose my lifestyle on somebody else, but I already know that that's probably a lot of trouble to begin with. And then when we get on the video call, I do ask that if they're married and this is coaching for both of them, again, the separate person aside, I get on a video call and I look for the one thing I look for is eye contact. So I want to see, ideally, the two people sitting in the same room. It doesn't always happen, but the two people sitting in the same room on the Zoom. And when I ask questions, even if one answers, I want to see if they're making eye contact before they answer the question.
Yeah.
If there's eye contact or there's like a little nudge or a little smirk, like smile here and there, they're connected. You know that they're on the same page. But I've had several more contentious calls where there's no eye contact, no interaction with each other. One person's bulldozing their way through the conversation, and people are fighting each other. It's like, oh no, we did this financially because it was your problem. Or, no, this is your dad or whatever. And one time I actually had to stop in the middle and be like, you guys need to be quiet and let me talk, or you're just wasting my time. Or else I'm going to ask you to go into marriage counseling. You really are kind of a couples therapist too. I do this. Yeah. I do this all the time. I do couples mediation or translation, as I call it. And I pick up on those things, the eye contact, who's controlling, is somebody looking for the approval of their partner. I also do, so my method for couples mediation, I interview them both privately one-on-one before the couple interview, and then I bring the couple together for a session. I observe them together, and then I do one more post-interview, separate. And I see, it's like a lot of times I'll see that if they're having financial problems or problems in other areas, it really comes out in the dynamic. Like when they're together and you can sense the tension. Yes.
And then all of a sudden when I get them alone and I see a whole different person come out.
Yeah.
They're not communicating.
Yeah.
It's insane to watch. So you literally are you didn't know you'd go into this. So as much as you would, right?
Yeah.
The psychological aspect.
So I'm okay with the psychological. I'm not okay being their marriage counselor. I make that
Okay,
very
so you
clear.
find a line. Okay,
Yeah.
there is a line.
There
You
is.
can always send them to me and I'll take over the marriage
Yeah.
counseling. But
Yeah.
what's the most uncomfortable situation that you've ever seen a client in?
I knew that they were on their way to divorce.
What was it?
One, essentially, they owned a business together. I always say, don't go into business with your
they say that, yeah.
spouse. The business is highly unprofitable and is not likely to be profitable in the future. One spouse believed that if they just threw more money at it, it will work. The other spouse wants to cut their losses and get out. According to my model, the one who said cut their losses and get out is right, but they just could not agree. And then about a week later, I found out they were headed towards divorce anyway. So.
Oh, that's so interesting.
Yeah.
Now, what about you and hubby, Mr. Save My Sense? What's the hardest thing you guys have ever overcome? I mean, it doesn't even have to be financial.
Oh, I can definitely say it. It's
Yeah,
the birth of
tell
our
me
first
what-
kid. The birth of our first kid was the hardest year because right after that, I developed postpartum depression, and it was COVID. So
Oh,
yeah, our
God,
kid was
that's a
born right
lot.
before
And it's your
COVID started.
first kid, too.
First kid. So I mean, you don't know what you don't know going into the first child. I thought I would try out this early retirement thing and not work for a whole year. I actually took a whole year off maternity leave, not paid. It wasn't fully paid, but I got a whole year off. They kept my seat
Because
warm.
you were still corporate at the time.
Yeah, I was still
right?
in consulting. And I didn't realize that actually had a massively negative impact on me. I do thrive on doing a little bit of work. So I call this podcast work, but in fact, I'm just having a ton of fun.
Of course.
And not working, COVID, isolation, because we actually moved to be with my parents for a whole year. So we weren't even in New York at the time.
You've been through so much between. I'm curious with the postpartum. Your husband's the one who told you to go to therapy in the beginning of your relationship.
He's the one who realized I had postpartum.
That's incredible.
I didn't know. I just thought my symptoms were insomnia, really weird eating habits, and then forgetting things, like just forgetting the most basic of things over and over and over again, and then not finding any pleasure in planning anything that we would like. He was trying to plan a trip to Colorado. I was like, I don't
You
want
would
to.
have loved that.
He's like, why don't we go out for dinner? I don't want to. He's like, this is really not like you. Like, you love all this stuff.
You lit up when you just talked about Japan. I can totally tell. So
And then he's like, how would you not like planning a trip? I'm like, I just don't really want to. It's so stressful. And like I was just spiraling.
a lot.
And I thought this was mommy brain. I thought this is what mom life is
a lot
supposed
of
to be
people
like.
tell me that they
Yeah.
just think that they'll snap out of it.
Yeah.
It's normal.
And then he started just like counting the signs. Like he actually downloaded a depression questionnaire. He like asked it to me over time. And he's like, Shang, you need to go get checked for depression. And at this point, it had been probably almost a year since symptoms have been ongoing. I mean, I was screaming that I wanted a divorce, everything. Like I was just, I was just so unlike me.
That
like,
is not
the whole time. It was not me. Like my parents had to take over some of like the child rearing of our oldest because
that's hard.
there were days where I was like, I just don't want to be a mom, and they were like, okay, this cannot happen with the kid, and obviously I live with them, so they're like, well, we're gonna just take care of the kid. Like Shang is doing something really weird. By the time I went to the doctor. My normal weight is around 95 pounds. The doctor said, have you weighed yourself recently? I said, no. She's like, you're 85.
Oh my God.
I was like, no, that can't be true. I'm 95. She's like, no, you're 85 pounds.
You carried a child in that body.
And I had no idea that I had lost that much weight due to depression. And then I got back to my therapist. She's like, oh yeah, I'm so glad you came back. By the way, yeah, it's a psychosomatic like thing with depression that your sleep and your eating habits go haywire. I was like, I didn't know. I just thought that was mommy brain. Thankfully, I got on medication and therapy.
good.
Cured first time, and then I had postpartum depression again with
the
my second kid. But this time we recognized it sooner, got treated faster, and this one resolved within about 6 months.
It's so common.
Yeah.
And you know what? People won't talk about it. A lot of my clients have told me that they feel shame that, why should they be associated with depression when they're experiencing one of the greatest things in life? They're having a child and they're experiencing depression, and they almost blame themselves, and it's so chemical.
Yeah.
It's something that's
It's
so
very
beyond,
chemical.
and there's so much shame associated, and I just don't understand. I love that you talked about it. I mean, what I think is so beautiful is that you first came in here, and I'm like, she brings out the spreadsheet. She talked about finances before engagement. This girl is with it, but you're human, Shang. You and your hubby are human. You've gone through a lot, and it's even better to see all the success that you've achieved. And I just want to tell you how amazing you are.
Thank
and I want to thank you for
you.
being on here. Please tell people how to find you. Do you have a website? Do you have an Instagram? What's the best way to get in contact with you?
Yeah, Instagram's where I'm most active. So save my cents, all one word, cents and dollars. Also savemycents.com. But yeah, please approach me, send me a message, tell me how you're doing with money, and I'm here to help.
I love your account. I follow it religiously. So thank you. Thank you for being here today, and thank you for sharing so much.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening or watching the show. Now, if you're interested in being featured in a new episode of the podcast, you can email us at loveunleashed@jltv.tv or just message me on Instagram. It's @Erin_wingwoman.